I'm Rick Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. We are a nonprofit advocating for fast, frequent, and dependable trains linking the country. We believe in an integrated network where in some places you've got high-speed trains traveling faster than 200 miles an hour, and they're linked either in some cases with trains traveling on different kinds of track, and in some cases with easy transfers by foot, to a wide network of buses and conventional trains and commuter trains, so that we create a broad transportation network that will reinvent this country. Right now, our current transportation system, which wasn't working a year ago, is under severe disruption, and we have an opportunity to really change the approach that the country takes, and need to seize that day. The three things that kind of keeping a track on are: one is Amtrak's appropriation ends on December 11th. And unfortunately, during this time that rail carriers should be seizing the day and trying to find how to serve more people in different ways, Amtrak has retreated from the market. That's not acceptable to us, and we need to work on that. But more importantly, next year will be the real fight over what the transportation program looks like overall. And we need to make sure it's easy in that program for independent operators and Amtrak alike in states to invest in new infrastructure and new tracks. And one of those projects is what we're here to talk about today. But first, a word from our sponsors. So PowerTrunk has been kind enough to sponsor this event. They make highly advanced radios that will be used in communication systems for high-speed rail and conventional rail lines. And they're entering the US market, and look for in the near future a presentation by them on what their capabilities are, and that will be an exciting presentation. So thank you to PowerTrunk for sponsoring this event, and also to the Chaddock Institute at DePaul. Next week they are doing an event on conventional passenger rail lines that have been restored and the impacts of restoring those services, and primarily on the SMART area DMU service that is just across the bay from San Francisco. If you don't get that, email Chaddock at DePaul.edu on our events page at hsrail.org. You can also link to the registration page. So thank you also to Chaddock for sponsoring, as well as PowerTrunk. So that gets to our main program. As we said, we're an opportunity to really change the way transportation works in this country, and we need a very transformative project to do that. And we believe that that project could be and should be the Texas Central Project, which will connect Dallas, Dallas and Houston with Japanese style, very lightweight, highly efficient, and very fast high-speed trains. We're excited that they have taken the initiative to go through a long process to get to approvals. They're very close. And so I want to thank Travis Kelly for coming today and giving us an update on what's going on, what the next steps are, and how we can help. So Travis, take it from here.
Great. Thanks very much, Rick. Really appreciate the opportunity to present this afternoon. And I was thinking, I've known Rick. I've known you for more than 12 years now, I think.
Yeah, and I was trying to remember who you worked for when you're running those Texas transportation seminars back in the.
Yeah, I worked for a group that was advocating for high-speed rail, and then it was sort of a dog catches car situation. A group came to Texas looking to bring high-speed rail to a pretty exciting corridor here in between Dallas and Houston. And so I ended up being the first employee for Texas Central at that time. So I've been with Texas Central a little over 9 years now. So it's been really great knowing you and working with you over these last years. And thanks for all the support you've given the project and your group too. I think what I'll do is attempt to share my screen here. And go through a quick slide deck. I think your audience, Rick, judging by how engaged and how supportive they've been over the years, and especially over the last few months in the regulatory process for this project, I imagine they understand and are familiar with the project. But for those that aren't, I thought I'd go through a quick, here's what we're doing, and then end up with where we are and where we're going, and then leave plenty of time at the end for some questions. I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to stay after the hard stop if folks are would like to continue the conversation for a little bit further. So we're bringing, as Rick said, the Shinkansen, Tokaido Shinkansen system to Texas. It's in sharp contrast to the current options people have when traveling between Dallas and Houston. The train is fast. We'll start off at 186 miles an hour, but the infrastructure will not limit us from going faster than that as the market warrants and energy costs and so forth allow. The train in Japan has been tested at 205, so there is a lot of data at that speed as well. But even at 186 miles an hour, that gets us between Dallas and Houston in less than 90 minutes, and that includes a stop at our midpoint station, which is about a 30-minute drive from the Texas A&M campus. And I'm not an Aggie. That's just the largest population center really between Dallas and Houston that we sought to provide some service to the rural part of the state as well. Most importantly, though, in addition to the safety, is the reliability. When you're talking about getting folks out of their cars or having them, not take an airplane but take the train instead, a lot of that is reliability. The train's going to leave on time, and it's going to arrive on time. And when part of the selling point is that you can, make a day trip to Houston or a day trip to Dallas, go to the other city, have your meeting, and come back, that reliability becomes key to making that happen. Today if there's no traffic, which is rare, if there's no construction, which is rare, and if you are a little heavy with your right foot, it's about a 3.5-hour drive from Dallas to Houston. So you spent 7 hours in the car and you haven't had a meeting yet. So the down and back, opportunities to do a day trip, you really don't make it's really not a good use of time. So the train will certainly change that. And of course, the travel experience is head and shoulders better than what you'll get behind the steering wheel or in an airplane. For those that haven't seen the train before, this is a glitchy, choppy version of the train. Apologies. When I'm not streaming this to Chicago and back, if you haven't ridden the Shinkansen, you know that even in the station area, it gets going pretty fast. This is just head and shoulders different from anything that we have currently in this country. In Japan, they operate 16-car train sets that hold about 1,600 people. In Texas, we're going to have 8-car train sets that hold about 400. So we'll have no middle seats. We'll have either 1x2 or 2x2 seating, depending on the class of service. So either way, you have a nice wide aisle, plenty of room for a wheelchair or a stroller. We've worked really closely with the disability community on designing the inside of the train, and we're doing likewise with the configuration of the station to make sure that the entire experience is accessible to everybody. And part of that, of course, is having accessible train cars and bathrooms and so forth. So for those of you not familiar with Texas, this is a crude representation of it. But, we looked early on at not just how many people live in North Texas, how many people live in Houston. A Wikipedia search wouldn't really get the investors too excited. So we spent a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time really getting this right, looking at not just how many people live on either end, but how many people make that trip, and more importantly, why they're making that trip. You know, if you know that I travel from Dallas to Houston 5 times, that's only of limited value to you, unless you know why I travel, because that tells you how sensitive my mode choice is to both cost and time. So if you're traveling with the family and you're going to see them, you know, going to a museum in Houston, or you're going to visit family, you're certainly a lot more flexible on time, and you probably don't want to spend as much as your company might be willing to send you for an emergency meeting, and the rates would be certainly higher for the 9 a.m. train on Monday morning, for example. So we looked quite a bit at how many trips were being made, and right now that's about 16 million per year total. About a million of those are by air, the rest are by car. And then we looked at why those trips are being taken, where within each region they start, and where within each region they end. You know, and if you stop 6 or 7 times along the way, then we know that you're probably making deliveries, or you have some other purpose that you're probably not a high-speed rail passenger. If your trip started in New Orleans and ended in Oklahoma City, you're probably not going to be a high-speed rail passenger. You may be an Amtrak to high-speed rail passenger, which I'll get to later. But we really want to look at what's the core of the travel market today, and then we use, you know, very, very conservative, pretty much even with inflation, to look at how that growth, or that travel demand might grow over time. So to pull this together, we've really assembled. I'll not let you live in suspense here. I'll go ahead and build the slide out. But we've pulled together a pretty incredible team to deliver the project. So starting at the top, Texas Central, we are a private company based in Texas. As I said, I was the first employee about a little over 9 years ago. So we've been at it for a while. We've been partnered with JR Central, who this consortium that you see with Mitsubishi Heavy, NEC, Hitachi, and Toshiba have created a joint venture called the Shinkansen United, TSU, and they have a full-time presence in their Dallas office. Their U.S. headquarters is in Dallas. And they are delivering everything from the top of rail up. So the train system, all the signaling, all the equipment to maintain the train sets and maintain the maintenance of way as well. And then moving down, the civil contractor, WeBuild, is a joint venture between Lane Construction and Cellini and Pergilo. And they're for this project, they're known as Texas High Speed Rail, which is not confusing around the office, referring to a company as Texas High Speed Rail. Nonetheless, they are really perfectly positioned to deliver the project. They're delivering everything from the top of rail down. So there are about 70 different facilities, signal huts, maintenance of way facilities, train maintenance facilities. All of the viaducts, all the earthworks. There's a lot of road work associated with this, rerouting and building new county and state roads and local roads. And they're delivering all that with the exception of the passenger station. The passenger station, it's relatively new. I don't have the consortium's logo up here, but it's a joint venture of Suffolk, H.J. Russell, and Tillotson. And they will be delivering all 3 passenger stations, Dallas, Houston, and Brazos Valley. The bottom right-hand corner, you see Renfe and Adif. They together are our operating partner. So they, they're advising us on all those aspects of the project from the operator's perspective. And as Rick and many of you all know, Renfe, operating in Spain, one of the world's newest complete systems to come online. They had to really compete with a pretty world-class toll road and highway system. So they have a lot of experience in designing everything that's customer-facing in a way to get customers into the train seats and to keep them in the train seats and have them choose passenger rail over travel by car. So that experience has been very, very relevant, and they have a full-time presence as well in Dallas. And then the top right-hand corner details how you pay for it. Our financial advisor, Citibank and MUFG, supporting our engagement with the global financial community. Oh, I did have our Matthews Southwest is the station developer, the master station. So they'll be developing separate from us, but obviously in close coordination, all the TOD around the station. Texas Central is responsible for delivering the station itself, and Matthews Southwest will be doing all the TOD immediately around all three stations. You know, we talk about how great this system is, how important it is, how it's going to be a game changer. It's going to create make Dallas and Houston a single region, and all these great things. But it has never been lost on us that it involves a lot of property that is not ours. So it is always been and should always be the most sensitive, difficult part of a project like this. While more than half of the 240 miles of linear infrastructure is adjacent to some other facility, whether it's a pipeline, a freight line, or a road, it's essentially a greenfield project. So we're buying, the parcels required to deliver that project. It's all purpose-built infrastructure built on property that we're negotiating with landowners for. These are a handful of the testimonials. There are more on our website. With our options purchase program, where we negotiate a purchase price and pay the landowner a significant portion of that, and then they stay in their home, stay on their property, and then when it comes time for us to build, then we come back and execute those options agreements and take possession of the property. The approach is working really well. We have more than 40% of the parcels that we need to deliver the project today. We've not used eminent domain at all, and I'll get to that later. Happy to speak to more of this, but it's a really important part of delivering a project like this. So when we're all said and done, I think it'll be the largest electric vehicle in the country. And Texas is obviously known for oil and gas, but renewables, as is the case nationally, I believe renewables are a larger and larger part of our energy production mix. And then so the grid is getting more and more green. So as the grid gets greener and greener, so does the train. So it's really a really great opportunity from air quality perspective in Texas as well. So where we are right now, as many of you all know, our rule of particular applicability was published in September, and we hope it's going to be in the Federal Register soon and make it final. But the publication draft was published by the FRA online on September 10th, and that's a really, really big deal. I believe it's the first RPA for a high-speed rail project ever. We are now being regulated as a railroad by the FRA, and that was 4+ years in the making. So a great big thanks to Rick and all of you all for your support in that process, of course. The FEIS, that process, the environmental review, started in the summer of 2014. So if you ever want to know how to spend tens of millions of dollars, this is how you do it. It only takes 5 years or 6 years, and you get an FEIS. But it really was important to get right. It involved a great deal of public engagement and public comment and feedback. And as a result of that feedback, the project really is better. So I would say the project worked. We would love for it to have taken a little less longer, but it is what it is, and the project is moving forward with the identified preferred alignment there. The 13th Appeals Court is a Texas Appeals Court, appellate court decision that upheld Texas Central's status as a railroad under state law. That's important for us because the right to survey and eventually, ultimately, the right to acquire property through condemnation in Texas is given to railroads by the legislature and has been for a couple hundred years. Or 150+ years. And so that our status as a railroad was challenged, but it was ultimately upheld by the appellate court. which was good for us in May. And then the STB asserted jurisdiction over the project just a couple months ago as well. And that was a process we initially started in 2016, and they declined to take jurisdiction. And then we, as y'all likely know, we executed an agreement with Amtrak, a joint ticketing agreement, where once we're up and operating, you'll be able to purchase tickets on the high-speed train between Dallas and Houston on any Amtrak kiosk, on the Amtrak app, the Amtrak 1-800 number if you want. And we will facilitate a connection between the Amtrak stations in Dallas and Houston and our stations in Dallas and Houston, so that if you're traveling, say, from St. Louis to New Orleans, instead of taking 30 hours by Amtrak, it'll take 10 hours, because we will provide that connection between Dallas and Houston, which currently does not exist by Amtrak. You have to go through San Antonio, and it runs every 3 days. So a big win for Amtrak passengers, a big win for all the users of the system nationally. And then by virtue of that agreement being executed, the STB determined that we were part of the National Railroad Network and asserted jurisdiction over the project. Happy to talk more about that as well if you'd like. So a few supporters of the project. Again, the project has become, I think, a better one as a result of the input from a lot of these folks. As there's organized opposition against the project that's very active, opposing us both in Austin and DC, and along with you all, these groups are also very, very helpful in presenting a solid front, representing to our elected officials that this project is really important to a broad array of folks, both locally, statewide, and nationally. We're on all the usual social media channels. If you text train, we don't sell your information for much. We don't get much for, no, we don't sell it at all. But we do keep you up to speed with the project, and happy to add you to that list and keep you up to speed with what we're doing. And thanks for the help along the way. And thanks again for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. I'm happy to answer any questions the group may have. Yeah.
Okay. No, sorry, I had my mute button on when the phone rang. So thank you very much for the presentation. Can you talk more about what happens in front of the Surface Transportation Board? What time frame you think that takes?
Sure. So we had 2 petitions before the STB. One was to reopen the prior petition, right? And that was, we argued that there was a change in circumstance. Essentially, that Amtrak agreement was now executed. And then the second petition was to be exempted from the full application process. There's pretty clear guidance from Congress that the STB should exempt applicants from the full application process if at all possible. But the STB ultimately ruled, while they did grant the petition to reopen and therefore asserting jurisdiction over the project, they determined that because of the high profile nature of the project, and that they wanted us to go through the full application. So we're preparing that now, and we'll submit it when it's ready. And that'll take some months to go through the process with the board. And the culmination of that would be the license to construct and operate. And then
how should we be ready to help in that process?
I think nationally, I think we're going to see a lot of opportunities in DC, especially in the new year. We've said all along that we want to be treated like everybody else. We want access to funds, for example, that would be available to anybody else. We do not plan on using any high-speed rail grants. That's easy to say because there are none, right? But we have expressed an interest in programs like RIF and TIFIA. And so where there's an opportunity for the public to weigh in that process or just express support, I'll certainly be in touch. And then also in the SDB process, there is another opportunity for the public to weigh in once the application is submitted. So that would be that's a really important opportunity for y'all to weigh in as well. So I'll certainly make sure you're aware of those opportunities. Thanks.
And then as we're engaged in the big picture of reauthorization, I know Brightline would like some changes in the private activity bonds restrictions. And I've heard talk of changes that people would like in RIF and TIFIA. Do you want to comment on those in any way, or what needs?
I can't really speak to anything that we're working on,
Okay.
or I just mainly because I just don't know. The programs were restructured a bit, a couple years ago, but I'm not sure of any specific changes that we're pursuing at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with the questions. Roger Huff has pointed out that the travel market has changed. How are you guys what are you guys thinking that means for the market for high-speed rail in Texas?
So it's a good question. I mean, we're looking at, how other systems are responding, where their recovery is happening at a different speed than ours is, perhaps, right? How quickly are people going back to using transit or Amtrak, for example, or even air? I think we have some clear advantage. High-speed rail has some clear advantages over travel by air, for example, in particular, because you have, instead of everybody queuing up for an hour and then going in one door, you have 8 doors. And it's just much more open. You have more space. And there's more things you can do to keep people, provide that distance. Since we're not retrofitting an old facility for our stations, we're building a brand new one. The timing is actually really good in that we can incorporate some of these designs and thoughts into the design of the station to make sure that, whether it's something like this, God forbid it happen again, or if people are just kind of slow to re-engage and re-embrace, travel, our designs can accommodate that. Whereas if, it's hard for airports, for example, to redesign the airport to accommodate something like, keeping people 6 feet apart and all that. So we're looking at it. It's a challenge, but we have every confidence that, by the time we're scheduled to be up and running, we will have rebounded fully from the economic downturn and people will be traveling again.
Excellent. I think you're right. People keep pointing out that, like, I didn't know about the 1918 pandemic until 5 or 6 years ago, because people kind of put it behind them and went back to their lives, right?
Right.
Howard, I'm going to answer your question in a long way. When I was a kid in elementary school, they taught us metric because we were going to switch to metric and be like the rest of the world. And we decided not to do that. So that's why we say 186 and 3 instead of 300. Tell me about Fort Worth, Dallas to Fort Worth. I know the MPO there is doing a study that seems to lean towards Hyperloop. What about them working with you to just extend your line to Fort Worth?
Well, so I'm talking to you today from Fort Worth. I live in Fort Worth, so I'm a little bit of a homer here. But so I have a vested interest in making this happen. So we have an MOU with the MPO that essentially says we all agree that we'd like the end result of all this to be a single seat ride, where you get on a train in Fort Worth and you get off in Houston, and vice versa. But we also acknowledge in an MOU that if there are regulatory or financial hurdles to making that happen, that a cross-platform transfer in Dallas would be acceptable as well. And so our station design in Houston, or in Dallas, excuse me, contemplates that, either scenario. And so the challenge is funding, right? There's strong demand in Fort Worth for a high-speed train to get to Dallas and to get to Houston. There's strong demand. There's not enough demand to pay for building double track, grade separated, straight, a high-speed rail line through a dense urban, dense urban environment between Fort Worth and Dallas. So, the region is working on trying to get the money. And if the money comes in, then we can, then we're happy to engage with them and negotiate a way for us to operate it and run the same trains. But short of that, there are some upgrades to the existing Trinity Railway Express that will terminate very close to the station area, where we can do a cross-platform transfer. There are a lot of really good options, and like anything else, especially in this industry, you get what you pay for. Unfortunately, the numbers aren't such. It's just so incredibly expensive to build the kind of infrastructure we need for the high-speed train between Dallas and Fort Worth. But our station is designed to accommodate many of those options that we in the region are working on. So hopefully it'll work out, but time will tell, and money will tell.
Yes. So what on the other end, I know there's a bus transfer center kind of on the next lot over. Have there been discussions about integrating that into the station?
There have been, maybe not physically into the station, but a very, very short pedestrian walkway between what would be a new bus rapid transit facility for the city of Houston and our train station. There's a little bit of a unknown because there's TxDOT is currently planning a new highway facility of some sort right next to our station, and that's, they've kind of gone back to the drawing board to look at what that concept might look like. So we're kind of waiting for some of that to get filled in the lines a little bit more. But that's the concept, is that you would be able to take a bus rapid transit bus from Houston Metro, which they've invested a great deal in and they're really successful using, and then transfer short pedestrian access to our station and hop on a train and off you go.
Now, if this area around Houston came up with the money to extend to downtown Houston, is the design such that you can get past that highway interchange that you're terminating here?
Not really. The way we're up next to 610, and there are some historical neighborhoods there and some other physical constraints that really preclude that. There are some, we're right next to the Union Pacific Railroad, so never say never. But there are some rail connections downtown, so it's not a foregone conclusion, but it wouldn't be on a Shinkansen. There would still be a cross-platform transfer of some sort.
Okay. And I keep trying to describe in a way that works. There's a CTA station here called Belmont, mm-hmm. where a lot of times two trains are in the station and people are going back and forth between the trains while the doors are open, and then they both leave, right? And so that happens every 5-10 minutes. It certainly can work for high-speed rail as well, when you need to make those kinds of connections.
Yeah.
So there's a question about any discussions with airlines about some sort of joint ticketing arrangement.
No. I haven't gotten that question in a long time. Most people in Texas remember how Dallas has two hometown airlines, and they both spent lots and lots of money in the 80s killing high-speed rail, or to fight high-speed rail. And so they've not done that this time around. But I think we're not, swinging the other direction where we're wanting to do joint ticketing with them. Yeah, those conversations haven't happened.
And have you given a thought to what percentage of the electricity will be renewable?
So we're getting our power off the grid. So that varies. I forget what it is right now. Texas leads the country in wind, and we're second in solar. So there's a lot of it, and we have some nuclear as well, if you consider that. No carbon emissions. So about a third, I want to say, of our of our electricity production is non-carbon based, but we're getting the power off the grid.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many employees do you expect to have when it's fully operational?
So during construction, we'll have about 17,000 full-time employees each year. And then the railroad, once passenger service begins, we'll have about 1,500 full-time jobs. And about a quarter of those will be located outside of Dallas and Houston. They'll be in the rural part of the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those railroad employees will pay into railroad retirement, correct?
I'm not sure how many of those will, but some portion of them would, yeah.
Okay. And what's the status of the final design, and when can construction start?
So we're at a nominal 15-20% design overall. There are sections that are a lot more than that. We've essentially done what needed to be done to support the environmental process, and then for our civil design builder to give us a fixed price, fixed schedule contract. And so the next step would be to, once we achieve financial close, would be to take that design to 30% and 60% and so on. So that's the next big step, is to let our designers go and start finishing the design. So we're currently looking at, given that notice to proceed, hopefully the first half of next year. And you'd see some, you'd see some geotechnical work, some more survey work, some clearing and grubbing and that kind of thing, but the real heavy works would happen after that.
Okay. Back in the old days, there was a Texas triangle and then a Texas T-bone. Is it possible to connect this to Austin and San Antonio?
So I do get that question a whole lot, and this is it's a matter of math, right? It's how big the markets are. You've got about 8 million people in Houston, about 8 million people in Dallas, depending on how far out you draw the circles, and you've got maybe 3 million in Austin. So there's a big market, but it's nowhere near where Houston and Dallas are. So I think the real market is Houston, Dallas, but I don't think you'll have to wait as long for the second high-speed rail line as you've had to wait for the first one. I think folks in Austin are clamoring for better ways to get to and from, and if there's a train line 90 miles to the east of them, they're going to be I think it'll happen pretty quickly after that.
I know that TxDOT did a Tier 1 EIS for a high-speed line from Fort Worth to San Antonio, right?
They did. They did. Yeah, and it actually went on down into Laredo, and then there's a lot of talk with the Mexican government to extend it down to Monterey, and that would be probably a DMU type service, and because there are multiple stops or more, it would generally parallel I-35. So there are lots of little towns along I-35 that would want to stop. So it's a great opportunity, and maybe hopefully something like that concept will move forward.
Okay. So a Southwest jet has 174 seats, right, in the newest version.
Okay.
I want to emphasize you're doing a small high-speed train with 400 seats.
Yeah, we're going to have 68 one-way trips each day. So we're going to have more seats going back and forth than Southwest and American combined.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I assume that that the trains will be designed so that the 2 8 cars can multiple unit together should you be very successful.
We're limited to eight car consist, so okay. we'll just get to buy more trains. That's a wonderful problem to have. I think we're going to start off with 13 or 14 train sets, and so we'll be able to run. We won't have a capacity problem. We'd love to have a capacity problem, but we've got lots of train sets, and we can get more.
Okay. Oh, can you show any, is it easy for you to show any pictures of what you think the interiors will look like?
I don't have those handy. We just released the first. If I let me track them, let me get them, and I'll share them with you, Rick. Uh,
Okay.
you know, it's wild how early in the process you have to decide things like seat color and train color and things like that. It's like yeah, we haven't even bought a shovel, much less put it in the ground, and someone's ordering paint. But I guess it matters. So, but yeah, I'll send that around as soon as I find it. Right?
Okay. And then how much will be elevated versus at grade?
About half will be on a viaduct. That's the current plan right now. A lot of that is because, as you know, there's no at-grade crossing, so there are no crossing arms. I used to say there's no whistle, but apparently there is some sort of a whistle they use in the yards. So, but effectively, there's no train horn, and uh, so yeah, a lot of that is to accommodate going above and below roads, but there's also a lot of wetlands that we're going through, so we just go above those as well.
Okay. Um, and then you'd said at one point there's a highway interchange where you're going through the highway, right? There's highway above and highway below.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of squeeze in there.
That's cheap.
um, Round trip ticket Dallas to Houston. How much do you think that's going to cost?
So I'll say you can't book an airplane ticket 8 years out, right? So no one else is doing this, but what it's going to vary. It'll be demand based, right? So if you decide you're going to pamper yourself and you're a procrastinator and you got to have a 9 a.m. Monday train and you want a scotch on your way down or whatever it is, you're gonna go first class. You're going to pay a premium for that. But for traveling off peak, and we'll have student fares and the like. So we're talking about one-way fares starting in the double digits, and then for those last minute fares, it'll be competitive with airfare. Right now, the business fare, so you're booking less than 14 days out for Southwest or American, it's right at or a little more than $500 round trip. And the planes, 8 months ago, the planes were full. So that's kind of what the market is telling us for those high end tickets. But we also know that most of our passengers are going to come out of their cars. So it's not just the actual cost of driving that we're up against, because not everybody calculates the tax reimbursement value of driving to Houston and back. It's the perceived value of driving, right? So it's the couple of tanks down, couple of tanks back, the stop it. There's a gas station chain that's famous in Texas, Buc-ee's. So there's a Buc-ee's stop and in 3 or 4 tanks of gas, depending on what model of F-150 you have, and that's kind of what you're thinking of. So we're up against the perceived cost of travel by car, so we've got to be real competitive on cost, but we can be.
I've noticed even I did a comparison of a uh, Milan to Florence trip, which is basically Chicago to Springfield for us.
Mm-hmm.
And their cheap tickets are the same price as an Amtrak ticket, $23.
Yeah.
But if you want to buy at the last minute and sit up in the front or in the back, depending on which way the train's going, then it's up in the $200 range.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
What about TODs type stuff near the stations, the 3 stations? What kind of thing is that?
It'll work. We're gonna have it. It'll be there. And I mentioned our master developer for the station area, Matthews Southwest. They have a big presence in both Houston and Dallas already, and so Texas Central is responsible for delivering the station, the passenger station itself, the tracks and everything the passenger would use. And then Matthews Southwest is working on all the TOD around it. And that's separate from the railroad. That's separate from us. But some really exciting things that being talked about, you know, and you know, all the stuff that you would think, you know, hotels, office space, residential, walkable, talking about transit access, you know, really redeveloping the area. For those who don't know, the area in Dallas where the station will be currently, it's about 60 acres of you know, it's mesquite trees and weeds. It was an old reclamation site of some sort. I forget what was there, but nothing's been built there ever, or at least for the last 50, 60 years. So it's a really great opportunity. And then around that area is already a neighborhood that's coming back. It's where our office is. And then in Houston, the station will be in the site of what is now the Northwest Mall. So it was one of the most popular malls in the Houston area, but like many of our malls, has fallen into disrepair. So it's a great opportunity for that part of town to be redeveloped and rethought. And so some great things coming, I think, you know, stimulated by the high-speed rail station.
Okay. So Phil Strebe is asking, can you kind of give an overview of the process that you know, the EIS, all of that, to kind of give a clue of what we need to do in the other states is what we're asked to do.
Sure. You know, hindsight is, you know, it can be frustrating because it's, you know, why did we do that, or why did we do that? You know, initially it was the objective was, you know, do we have a project? Is there enough ridership to justify the kind of investment that we think it's going to take to deliver high-speed rail in Texas? And so that took, you know, ridership studies and all the rest of it, and then that told us what we needed the travel time to be to capture enough of the market. They said you got to make the trip in 90 minutes or less to be competitive with air and auto, full stop. And so then we did what we refer to as our phase 0 study, where we hired Arup, actually an engineering firm, to look. They knew all the train characteristics, you know, you know, how quickly it gets up to speed, braking, curve, you know, all what types of curves it could tolerate and all the rest of it. And they determined that there were some viable routes that would allow the train to get between Houston and Dallas in less than 90 minutes. And so from there, it evolved into you know, getting some of the legal and regulatory framework, you know, getting familiar with it. What do you have to do? Because I don't know when the last railroad was started from scratch in Texas. I think we're obviously the most recent one. I don't know before us, the last one. So it took a lot of work, a lot of lawyers and others, you know, looking at what it takes to set up a railroad in Texas. And then we started the environmental process in 2014. And it took us 2 years to negotiate an MOU with TxDOT to clarify what their role would be relative to the FRA. And then the FRA brought on a third-party environmental consultant to do all the work on behalf of the FRA and send us checks, or bills rather. And yeah, bills. And there's a big difference. Thanks. And making sure you were listening. And so from there, it was, you know, the environmental process is kind of, you know, blocking and tackling, you know, as you know, that process is kind of just, you know, pretty, you know, prescriptive. You know, it took longer than we would have wanted. But it's a first of its kind. So there were lots of questions that we were asking of regulators, of elected officials that hadn't been asked before, you know, not seeking federal money or state money, you know, no grants at the federal level. We've always made it clear that we're interested in pursuing, you know, RIF loans or something like it. But at the state level, no grants, no loans, no gimmies, no freebies. But when you're talking to a state legislature and you're not asking them for anything, you're still asking them for something, because they can you know, shut you down if they want, right? And so, you know, even though we're a private company, you know, and you might assume that we're not held to certain requirements don't apply to us. Well, they most certainly do. There's an expectation that these big public works projects, do certain things and do them right. And so there's a lot of sunlight on the project. It's high profile, and everything we do gets examined. And anyway, it's been a fun, mostly fun process. And looking forward to seeing it through completion. But happy to talk to anyone in your group, Rick, offline, and anything specific. And there are other folks on the team who, obviously big supporters of what we're doing in Texas, but see the value of that this technology applied elsewhere would bring to other communities. So happy to be helpful however we might be able to.
Okay, so I think you have in that process answered the lessons learned question. So what are your lessons learned that could help others?
Oh, there are a lot. There's so many, right? And there are more to learn. I'm not through touching the hot stove, right? There's still some things that we could be doing better or different. But again, it's a first of its kind. How many projects pay for their own environmental process? How many projects go out and have to acquire 240 miles right away? Like, it's just a lot of individual challenges that on their own are daunting, but then getting to do them all together at the same time and having all that come together really is the big challenge. Is having all these separate processes come together at the right time is the real challenge. And then we have a lot of folks who are really supportive of the project, and it's hard to keep everyone excited, about the project and engaged. And so that's tough too, but we're very grateful for all those who do stay engaged and support us.
And I am really grateful that you all have stuck with it through this process. And I think the next ones will be much easier because we can learn from your experience. So another kind of easy one. So sometimes people work specifically with feeder buses, kind of in a joint process. California is on their Amtrak services does that. And I know other operators have talked about doing that. Has there been any discussion about how you would create a feeder bus network beyond the local transit?
No, we had some approaches, especially with the Brazos Valley station. There's the Brazos Valley, the Brazos Valley Transit operates a bus network around Brazos County, and then they operate the system on the Texas A&M campus for buses, and they do a really good job at both of those. And so, but our station is well outside their service area, and it's not really anyone's service area. So we've been contacted about, from some folks interested in, setting up a shuttle service between our station and a couple of the cities around that station. Within Dallas and Houston, there are robust transit agencies already. And while there might be some interest in, for example, a dedicated bus from a certain point in downtown Fort Worth to our station, because until the train system is up and running between Fort Worth and Dallas the way we would want it to be, there's some kind of off, some opportunities like that, but mostly in the Brazos Valley station.
Okay. And then as long as I've been in this, there's been talk about high value, low weight freight that today pretty much moves by team, right? And the TGV had a mail train until it came time to replace the train, and they decided not. Italy has had one experiment that is still running, I think, and China's done some experiments. I've always wondered why it hasn't gone beyond that. Have you looked at Package Express?
I think we have at some level. It's not part of our plan today, and some of that has to do with our RPA and the intent to copy everything that is safety critical that's going on in the Tokaido Shinkansen system in Japan, and copy it and bring it to Texas. So while the paint color, seat configuration, things like that might change, anything that's safety critical, which includes the weight of the a lot of things that have to do with the freight that's, different from hauling around people. That's not, that because we don't have an example in Japan to point to, at least to start off, we're not contemplating that. Um, and for the most part, I mean, I just don't know what the market would be for to get something that quickly between Dallas and Houston that isn't already being served by air. But I just don't know. But it's not part of our plan right now.
Okay. And how will food and beverage service work?
There will be hot food and cold beverages. There will not be a dining car. So we're working through how that's going to work right now. I'm not sure what the current planning is. With a 90-minute trip, you don't need a 5-course meal, but certainly having a hot meal will be one of the perks of your upper tier, your upper class service. There will also be plenty of opportunities in the station area to grab something and bring it on the train with you, which is obviously common globally as well.
Excellent. And then how does the relationship work between you and TxDOT?
So they are a party to the environmental process. They were a cooperating agency on the EIS. We crossed 61 TxDOT facilities. So we're working with them on how their approval of our road design, and where we acquire property for a new TxDOT facility and then build it to their standards and then convey that property to them. So we've worked through all those mechanics. On an ongoing basis, FRA is our regulator, and there are some things that FRA uses the TxDOT rail division for safety inspections and bridge inspections and the like. But for the most part, it's limited to their inspection and maintenance of their bridge crossings. So where there is a road over rail intersection, we'll have an agreement in place that dictates when and how they can inspect and maintain and make repairs to their structures, for example.
Okay. So I think the last question I think will be for Maurice, and I see he just left, but it's an interesting question. Have others approached you about doing this in their region? And how long after it's successful would you look at doing it in other places?
I assume you mean the company and not me personally, but
yeah. I'm sorry, Texas Central.
Yeah. I'll give you the same answer I usually give when I get asked about connecting to extending from Dallas to Austin to San Antonio, and that is, we've got plenty to say grace over right now. Delivering I don't know of a single larger infrastructure project in the history of the state. Cost-wise, will be bigger than the big, which is scary to say out loud. But, so this is a huge, huge project. So we have our hands full. But, and we will have learned a number of lessons along the way. So I think, whether we're involved in that second or third high-speed rail line in Texas, who's to say? We're focused squarely on Houston, Dallas right now.
Excellent. I want to point out that you are crisscrossed with interstate highways, which were a pretty big deal. And they didn't just come down from the sky because the Lord said they should do it. I just get frustrated that we forget that the interstate highway system was this huge, massive government project.
Yeah.
It took a lot of coordination and work,
Yeah.
So
we're opposed to it, and yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it, unless somebody has a really pressing question I missed. I think that's it. So thank you very much. This was very valuable. I really appreciate it. And we'll stay in touch and let us know if there's anything our members can do to help with the process.
Will do. Thanks very much, Ray. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for all the support over the years, and we'll need it moving forward too. Thanks.
Great. Talk to you later.